Good evening, everybody. I'd like to welcome everybody to the Town of Ayer Select Board meeting for Tuesday, December 17th. This meeting / hearing of the Ayer Select Board will be held in person at the location provided on this notice. Members of the public who are welcome to attend this in-person meeting. Please note that while an option for remote attendance and/or participation via Zoom is being provided as a courtesy to the public, the meeting / hearing will not be suspended or terminated if technological problems interrupt the virtual broadcast, unless otherwise required by law. Members of the public with a particular interest in a specific item on this agenda should make plans for in-person versus virtual attendance accordingly. This meeting will be live on Zoom and Channel 8. The public may access the proceedings by joining Zoom meeting ID number 978-772-8220, which is a new Zoom number, or by calling 929-205-6099. For additional information about remote participation, please contact Carly Antonellis, the Assistant Town Manager, at atm@ayer.ma.us or 978-772-8220, extension 100, prior to the meeting. If we could all stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge
allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Are there any changes to the agenda as presented?
I have none.
Okay.
I'll make a motion to approve the agenda as submitted.
I'll second that. All those in favor?
Aye.
Chair says aye. Agenda is approved. Any announcements this evening, Carly?
Nope.
Okay. All right. And then, is there anybody here or online for public input? Yes, please.
We would like to make public input for the aggregation issue. So I don't know if you want us now or if you want us when you're going to talk about it.
We can do it for the aggregate. We can do it during that. That's okay. So that's going to bring us up to our next item is going to be Attorney Connie Sullivan and the Devon's Crest Tenants Association. Is there anybody here from?
Does not appear so.
Okay. They were looking for.
Mr. Chair.
Yes.
Members of the board. As far as I know, Attorney Sullivan and representatives were going to attend. I had not heard otherwise, and I don't believe they're on the screen. And they wanted to discuss with the board your authorization for a request of a letter of support. I would suggest respectfully to the chair that if they're not here, you move on with the other items. If they show up, it's your prerogative, to recognize them later. Or perhaps something came up and it needs to be rescheduled.
Sure, we can do that. Okay, so we'll move on to the next item then, which will be the Town of Ayer Municipal Energy Aggregation. It will be the selection of options by the Select Board. And
So, Mr. Chair, just to frame it, and so the board's aware, on the Zoom screen, we're joined from Colonial Power with Mark Capadona and Denise Allard.
Welcome back, guys.
At the December 3rd meeting, the board had a presentation and a discussion about the municipal energy aggregation options, and the board at that time had decided to move to this meeting tonight, December 17th. For two action items. One is the board needs to vote to authorize the three options that will be offered through the aggregation. And then secondly, to authorize the town manager to execute the aggregation agreements, because as Mr. Capadona explained last time, it'll be very time sensitive between when the board meets or not. The three options to frame in my memo was just meant as guidance for the board. It's ultimately up to the board. At the December 3rd meeting, in addition to on the screen that's up there, the first option, which was the standard retail electric supply, which would be the most affordable option was obviously one of them in consideration, since one of the main intents of the aggregation was to offer an affordable alternative, again, which folks can opt out. Additionally, the board received a very informative presentation from Ms. Carolyn McCrory, who I'm sure is going to speak further to that, about the importance of a nuclear energy option, which are number 3 and 4. There are 2 options that you can see on the screen, and this is in the board packet. And there was also discussion from another resident, and some discussion about the renewables option, which is the National Wind, the second option there. So ultimately, again, it's up to the board to select the 3, one of them as the default. As presented, this is an opt-out, so people will have the option, if they choose, to opt out. And that's sort of where it was left off. But ultimately, it's up to the board to decide on the options.
Janice, since our last meeting, did you have any other thoughts or ideas on it?
Sorry, I'm trying to read it on my screen. I can't, it's not turning right. Okay, so I guess my one question I have right now is, if we pick the default, can that be changed, like, by the, in a couple of months, like the town people say, no, we don't want that to be the default? Or is that set tonight? I just want to clarify that.
So what we'd be doing is, when we went out for executable pricing in early January, we'd be trying to pare this down, and we'd be asking the suppliers to price only the certain options you tell us. So certainly you could change the default to one of the optional and one of the optional to the default, but it would only be what we asked them to price, unless we went back out.
Okay, so if, next month you come back and you found out that, one of the other options was better priced than the one we decided was the default, we could change it then?
So what we're looking to do here is, we're looking for you to narrow down the products and potentially some of the terms. So when we do set an executable price for early January, we're just going to ask the suppliers to price that.
Okay.
So you're only looking at pricing for the products that you selected. Certainly we could make a change and refresh executable pricing at another point in time, but that's what we'd be looking to do here. So.
Okay.
I will also say, good news today. Well, good news. We got the national grid rate, so good timing. It's going to be effective Feb 1. In the top right corner of that matrix you're looking at, highlighted in yellow, we were estimating around 14 cents. It's going to be 14.6.
Okay.
So if that helps at all.
Okay.
Okay, 14.6.
I think the way, Robert, you explained it, I think that's what I'm in favor of. Choosing the cheapest as the default, choosing the nuclear option, and then also choosing an all renewable option for 3.
Mr. Chair, through you, I know that Ms. McCrory wants to make some additional comments. I think it's important to note that perspective, the recommendation, is from an economic point of view, which was originally how this started.
Right.
However, there is an argument to be made, and Carolyn can make it much better than I did, as she did on December 3rd, of the importance of the nuclear piece as the nuclear energy in terms of clean energy, et cetera. So again, it's ultimately up to the board. The proposal that was just to frame the issue.
Carolyn, would you like to come up and?
And I have with me 2 other Ayer residents. Annie Reed, who lives across the street from me on Wachusett, and Dale Lavengier, who is also a resident and lives on Spectacle Pond. And actually, Dale gets his energy from a municipal light company, namely the Littleton Light Company. And what I'd like to say is that it's really important for us to move forward with with clean energy, as well as we know price is important. And in particular, we are in favor of nuclear energy because it is clean, it's reliable, and there's a lot of talk about it these days. And if you look at, this is not exactly what we're doing right here, right now, but this is a view of what municipal light plants do. First of all, the electricity cost is about 40% less than what we pay through National Grid. And if you look, 50% of their electricity comes from nuclear, 25% from hydro. Then they have wind, solar, and as a matter of fact, their emissions, their non-emitting generation that you see is 94%. That is not true for the rest of New England. ISO New England, we typically have at least 40 to 60% gas and about 20% nuclear. So we're asking for you to really help us become a state where clean energy is paramount, and in particular, nuclear energy. And if you look at actually the costs, I know that Chris, you recommended the lowest cost, but if you look at the 36-month length under supplier 4 for the cheapest, which is 12.9 cents, and then look at 36 months for the nuclear, and it's just 13 point. So it's only 0.1% more for doing, what's right for our country and for our state. So we recommend that you choose that as a default option. And I also might want to remind you, I have talked with Chris, and at the last meeting, Chris specifically said he would prefer the nuclear option. So I'm asking you to vote for that as the default.
Okay. Yeah, please. You're welcome to come up too. And just state your name just for the record.
Dale Levandier, live at 3 Sanders Point Road in Ayer. Just as a contrast to this nuclear option and the default and other options, in the case of the WinRex option, let's say, you'll get that price, you're going to negotiate that price. There's no guarantee that on a day when there's no wind, you're going to get your power from that point.
Uh-huh.
You're almost certainly going to get it from, the main source of power generation in New England is natural gas. That's all there is to it. So that's just a contrast in the point. In the case of the nuclear option, you buy nuclear, you're going to get it.
Okay.
That's the reliability issue. So that's all it is.
Okay. Janice, any other questions?
No, I don't have a problem with nuclear, even setting it as the default,
Same,
because, as is already established too, is if, they go to negotiate the price, something flips, it can be changed to allow the consumer to have the best price, with a reminder that, everybody can, if they didn't like the default, they could pick it in their own too, so I don't see any problems with it.
And I agree. If this is going to help us get to a cleaner energy source faster, I agree. We can set the nuclear as the default, and then use the other two being the more economical one, and then the one that's all renewable for the 3 options. But we'll set the nuclear as the default.
Yeah, that sounds good to me.
Yeah.
Mr. Chair, just a question. So there are 2 nuclear
Thank you.
options. one, is there a preference over one over the other? I mean, there's yeah, which
Which
But
one?
the 10%.
the 10%, so
Yeah,
the,
because it's both cheaper and
yeah,
it's more nuclear.
Okay.
so number
The
four.
fourth one,
chart.
okay.
Okay.
Denise and Mark, does that make sense?
It does, and we can get pricing on both the +5 and the +10 on executable day, and aim for the +10, but if something happens with the market, you'll have the pricing for the +5, and then do the wind and the meets RPS, meets mass requirement, if that
Oh.
works.
Okay.
Do you also want to see all terms 6 through 36, or were there any you were okay with us taking off the table? Or we can certainly get pricing for all of them, just wanted to ask.
No, I think we're good.
Yeah, might as well get pricing for all of them.
Okay, will do. And so I would just say, right, we're shooting for an April start. We have to sign by the end of January. So Robert, if it's okay, we'll be in touch in early January to set an executable date with you.
Yep. Just before, I agree, Denise, just to the chair, we'd be looking for, the board to authorize the three choices through a vote for the record, and then just to authorize the town manager to execute the agreement that Denise spoke of.
Okay. Yes. Okay. Pauline?
Oh, I had to hit the unmute button. Thank you, Sean. I have an all-electric house, as I said, on December 3rd. Carolyn, you may be the best to answer this. Of these options, how many are 100% clean energy? Which is what I have now with my current supplier.
That will be an option. I mean, if the board state agrees to what we just talked about, that will be an option.
That would be the.
Right.
Yeah.
So the two nuclear proposals and the default one, I forget which that is. I'm not looking at the document. Those are all 100% clean energy, because there are many, many companies out there that are not.
Well,
And I strive to find one. This time around, I have Inspire, and it's 100% clean energy, and it's 14 cents. So I wonder if these are going to be, and I think we're still going out to bid, if I understood what Denise said.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Correct.
Pauline, I think we were going to choose the nuclear and they were going to get pricing on both the nuclear. And the nuclear is going to be the default option. And then the other two options are going to be the most economical priced option, and then one that is all renewable.
I appreciate that, as long as they're 100% renewable, because that, I think, is the key to doing this, aside from saving ourselves a lot of money. So if you could at least include that in the next grid when we come up with the actual bids, what is and is not 100% renewable, because that's what I look for when I find a supplier.
That WinRex is the 100%. The 63 plus 37, it's 100% renewable.
I understand that, but the general public may not.
Okay.
So if you could at least include that, I would appreciate it. Thank you for doing this. And then one last comment. When the aggregation contract was first presented, a year ago maybe, I raised the fact that the town of Ayer does not have a charter, and I have never yet seen whether that was corrected. Can anybody confirm that?
It was.
Through the chair,
corrected,
yeah.
yeah.
The assistant town manager, Pauline, when that was raised, it has been corrected in the document.
Perfect. We don't want the document to fail because of that. Thank you so much. I appreciate the effort everybody put through for this.
Thank you, Pauline. And I'm sorry, does somebody else have?
Sarah with the online, I guess.
Oh, I can't even see that.
Yeah, right here.
Sarah?
Hi.
Hi.
I just wanted to, when we started this process a year ago or so, I mean, it was billed because we wanted to bring the prices down,
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
correct?
correct.
I just want to say that that's still the most important thing to me personally. I all these other terms, I know they're important, but the lowest cost is the most important. Thank you.
Thank you for your comment, Sarah. Okay, if there's Any other questions or comments?
Just one comment. So as it looks right now, based on the price that we know National Grid's gonna be, all the choices will be less
Yep.
than National Grid, which is a good thing.
Yep.
So we want nuclear as default, standard, and renewables
Yes.
as the options.
Yes.
Yep.
Okay. So I'd like to make a motion that the select board choose the nuclear option as the default, with the options being for the renewables and standard.
Second it. All those in favor?
Aye.
Chair says aye.
And I'd like to make a motion that the board authorize the town manager to sign the agreement, execute the agreement, when it comes through.
I'll second that. All those in favor?
Aye.
Chair says aye. Great. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Mark.
Thank you, guys.
All right. I could turn things back around. All right. Next up is going to Chief Gill.
Chief? Mr. Chair?
Yes.
As the chief is coming up to the table, if I could just, for a moment, I'd just like to publicly announce, and I believe the board is aware, that the police department, under Chief Gill's leadership, just was awarded a $71,000 grant from the state to implement body cameras. And I know he's worked very closely with all of his people on a plan to implement that, but I think that was a major achievement to get the grant to cover this.
Very good.
And here he is.
Here I am.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
Thanks.
We'll be reporting on that more, especially as we get to selecting the equipment and rolling out the program, which is going to be during this fiscal year. So
All right.
we're excited about that.
So it looks like tonight you have a request for board authorization for a portion of opiate settlement funds.
I do, and thank you for just hearing me out real quick. So when the Neshoba Valley closed, we thought that there was going to be a large gap, especially in services, medical services provided to the town. With the potential for having the ambulances out of town, we'd be left to be providing services that we normally relied on from our paramedic crew, which beat us to all calls all the time. So it really never became an issue for us to carry AEDs or have Narcan on board with us, because it was readily available with the paramedics. With the closing and them being out, we really felt that there was going to be a gap there, and that there would be situations where we'd be the first arriving responders in providing medical care until somebody else could arrive with a higher level of care. So we embarked on getting AEDs and bringing Narcan on board, which we're going to be rolling out the training with this week and next week, so we can get all certified on that. We're going to be overseen by the Leominster Hospital. They're our medical control oversight. And so we have that all in place. So we're ready to go. And we've got the product here. We're getting a few more pieces, which I think just arrived this week. But what we're looking for here is, because these were expenditures, at least for the Narcan, that we weren't budgeting for. So we'd be looking to see if the board would authorize us to use some of the settlement funds from the opioid settlement cases.
I was actually, when I saw this, I was really glad to see it, because when I was thinking about what we could use that money for, this was something I was going to actually contact you about to see if it was something that would be beneficial. So I'm definitely all in favor of it.
And Mr. Chair and members of the board, just to add to that, first, as the board is aware, the use of the opioid settlement funds requires authorization by the board, and the balance in the opioid settlement account as of tonight is $21,009. So there's more than enough funding to cover this eligible use.
And this is the perfect way to use it.
Yeah, absolutely. So if there's no other questions or
Yeah.
comments?
I'll make a motion that the select board authorize, up to $2,255.45 of the opioid funds for, the state of.
I'll second that. All those in favor?
Aye.
And Chair says aye.
Excellent, thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Yeah.
Thank you. Okay, and moving right along. Come to town manager's report.
Mr. Chair, members of the board.
Good evening.
You have the warrants that were that have been reviewed since the board last met on December 3rd in the packet that were approved. Under the administrative update, I just want to take an opportunity to thank everyone that was involved with the successful annual holiday candlelight stroll and tree lighting last Saturday. It was a great success. I think there was almost 250 people. A special thanks, as always, to the assistant town manager, who puts the lead on getting all of the funding for the lights and efforts there. A special thanks to the police and fire and DPW, our public safety departments, for making a safe event. And a special thanks to Chuck Schultz and DJ Zoller from the facilities department for all of their help, and Alicia Hersey from community development. I know that Selectman Livingston and Selectman Tavares led the gang down the street. It was a very successful event, so many thanks there. The tuba concert that took place on Sunday, I'm also told there was over 100 people in attendance to the concert. That was a huge success. A special thanks again to Alicia Hersey for her efforts with that. And then this Sunday, December 22nd at 1 p.m., Santa is coming back to Ayer again for the Santa Parade that will kick off at Peroni Park and come down Main Street and go up Washington Street to the high school. And it should be a great parade event, and Santa is going to stick around, I'm told, at the high school to meet with kids and do photos and so forth. So there'll be another sort of our third holiday event, so we're looking forward to that. Administratively, I just want to point out that the initial budgets from all departments per the budget calendar are due on December 27th at noon. And then the draft one of the budget per the calendar will be transmitted to the select board, the finance committee, and the general public through your packet by January 10th is the deadline. So that will be coming up. If there aren't any questions from the board on any administrative matters, I'll get right into the action items I have this evening.
Okay.
So the first item is a request for the board to authorize an amendment to the rate review committee charge. As the board is aware, with the passage of the stormwater enterprise by town meeting on October 28th, we will be developing the stormwater rates for implementation for July 1st. And as was publicly said by the board and at town meeting, the rate review committee will assume the responsibility of reviewing the rates each year and making recommendations, just as it does on water and sewer, as it does solid waste too, but the same timeline for water and sewer would be to review the rates and be making recommendations in the March-April timeline. And I know that the rate review committee met on December 10th and voted to recommend, so I'm respectfully requesting that the board vote to amend the charge of the rate review committee to include the annual review and recommendations of the stormwater rates.
I don't have any questions. You have questions?
I don't have questions.
Okay, so I'll make a motion that the select board amend the charge for the rate review committee to include stormwater rates.
Okay, I'll second that. All those in favor?
Aye.
Chair says aye.
Okay, now it's official. We can talk about it.
The next item in your packet is the board's approval and signature of the conservation restriction for Shaker Mill Pond. The Conservation Commission voted to approve and sign the restriction at their meeting last Thursday. You have the restriction in your packet and the signature page, and it would be for vote would be to approve and for signature by the board.
Any questions on it?
No.
It's pretty straightforward.
I'll make a motion that the select board approve and sign off on the conservation restriction for Shaker Mill Pond as presented.
I'll second that. All those in favor?
Aye.
The chair says aye.
The next item, number 4, as the board is aware, the state economic bill finally passed the legislature and was recently signed by the governor. And specifically in Section 298 of this legislation, the Secretary of Economic Development and the Secretary of Housing and Livable Communities is to convene a working group to determine a strategy and plan to provide for increased housing production within Devens. And that working group is to include representatives from the town of Ayer, Harvard, and Shirley, as well as from the Mass Development Finance Agency and the Devens Enterprise Commission. And so I did confirm with the state. The board has the email that was sent from the state. They had a deadline of December 16th, but I had informed them that the select board would need to meet in open session to make its decision, so there's no issue there. I also did confirm that with respect to the 3 towns, they are looking for 1 member of the select board from Ayer, Harvard, and Shirley. So it's recommended that the board discuss and make a motion to select a member of the Ayer Select Board to serve on this working group committee. We believe, I asked, I'm still waiting for some specifics, but I believe the meetings are going to be, they'll be public meetings, but they'll be on Zoom. And the meeting cadence to be determined, but doesn't look like it's going to be like a weekly commitment type of thing. So I open that up to the board. I think it's important that obviously Ayer is at the table and represented there. My understanding is, in addition, that the working group's efforts will culminate in formal recommendations in a formal report to the governor on the issue of housing at Devens.
So all I know is that, this had to be, the committee has to be formed by the 20th, because then that's the 30 days. There was some confusion last week as to whether or not a meeting would be on the 20th, and I was like, well, I don't think that's even possible, so I don't think we have to worry about it. Plus, right before Christmas, I don't think there's going to be a meeting. So I'd like to know if you're interested in being on.
Yeah. I'm definitely interested in the housing aspect of it. I'll do it. I'll be on it.
Okay. Yeah, I think that would be great. Yeah, it'd be interesting to see what this is going to be about. I know that in the update, there a member of the DEC and a Devens resident, I believe, will also be members of the committee also, which is good because they'd be the neighbors.
Yeah.
So,
And
so
after all this time, finally something is possibly moving on this, or discussion.
Well, this is going to be interesting because, we've just kind of discussed housing over there for a while now. And, as far as Vicksburg Square, and that keeps falling through. And so I don't know how this is going to, they've lifted the cap, which is a good thing, but how is this, is there going to be any talk about Vicksburg Square? Because, right developer can come in and fix it.
Yeah.
So I think it's going to be really interested. So I'm looking forward to, your feedback from it and everything.
Do we need
I believe so.
a motion?
Yeah.
Okay.
So I'll make a motion that the select board member for this new Devens working group be Sean Copeland.
I'll second it. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Mr. Chair, congratulations. I'll transmit your name to the state, and I'm sure you'll be hearing next steps from them. And we, as Selectman Livingston mentioned, we look forward to your periodic updates as this moves forward.
All right.
Mr. Chair, if there is an objection, I just ask the fire chief to join us at the table for the next item, which is an update on the Neshoba Valley Medical Center. Chief Johnston is on the governor's working group and also has been a pivotal leader on the emergency management response part of our efforts. So I do want to just offer a brief update to the board on this important issue. So since the working group has been formed and it has 34 members on it, it became clear that it would need to break up into focused areas, which took some time. And so it is broken up into 3 subgroups. So there's still the working group that is meeting bi-weekly, and there are now 3 subcommittees. The first one is dealing with the hospital site, and that is being co-chaired by myself and State Representative Margaret Scarsdale. Chief Johnston and Chief McCurdy of Littleton are on there, as is Dr. H. I can never pronounce his name, the orthopedic surgeon that we all
Everybody knows him as.
yeah, and Dr. Hussein, who was a pulmonologist for years up there, and Dr. Godfrey and then Audra Sprague, who is a leader of the nurses. The nurse is on this key group. So this group is charged with 2 specific things under the umbrella of the working group, is to the future of that site. Specifically, the first primary thing is emergency services up there, and then phasing to a community hospital. And the second piece that is very important, and I know Representative Scarsdale and being in the legislatures on this too, is the funding piece. So that subgroup is focused and is meeting weekly on that issue. The second subgroup is the emergency response subgroup, which is all of the chiefs of the Neshoba Valley, and they are focused on specifically the emergency response, which we have an ongoing crisis with, my words, but it's true, and in a minute I'll have the chief speak to that, in the sense that the challenges continue to be real for everybody, and the issue of funding, and we continue to convey that without federal or state funding to the emergency response infrastructure out here, it is going to be challenging. Now, we, as the chief always reminds everybody, we have the best department and we have very good departments. They are going to respond and provide the highest care. But because of the closure of the hospital, it's taking longer to respond, and it's creating a bottleneck situation, specifically at Leominster, but also Emerson. And I'll let the chief, through the chair, speak briefly on his update from there. And then the third subgroup is looking at transportation out here, because before the hospital closed, we have never had a robust public transportation system out here like Kearney does in Boston. That issue wasn't as much for that hospital closure, but out here we were struggling to begin with before this. So this transportation subgroup is really looking at systems and funding to get people to appointments, to specialists right now with the hospital closed, but also to bolster that system moving forward. They are going to be focusing on that meeting. That group is co-chaired by a woman from Healthcare Connects, her name escapes me, and somebody from the state. And there are many folks on that group. I'm not, but I've attended some of the meetings. They're really focusing on COAs as far as transportation. As you both know, we have that issue here, and our own director, Katie Petrossi, has been involved with the assistant town manager and Mart about bolstering Ayers. So those are the 3 main focal points. What we're seeing at this point is that the model that would make sense, the first thing is to get an emergency room back there, the first piece. If we get the emergency piece back, it relieves the stress that's being put on the emergency response. That being said, that can't be the end goal. That's the first step, and then to phase back or phase to what we are calling a 21st century community hospital. Funding, the position of many of us is Secretary Walsh indicated that there was $70 million that were given to the other hospitals, the Steward situation. Our position is we're looking for the same consideration here. We're also on the funding piece besides the state piece, Congresswoman Trahan and the federal piece, but also any philanthropic, nonprofit, private sector, to put together the funding. It's estimated that the emergency room piece would cost somewhere between, and this is just an estimate, 40 to 70 million to get that back. It goes to show it should have never closed in the first place. And the full hospital would be 100 to 150 million.
Yeah.
The last piece,
And that's just the
yeah.
physical aspect, right? That's not
Right,
including
that's
the
to get
debt
everything,
and-
yeah. The other piece that I would offer is, so the property is under Apollo management. Some folks, because I've received calls, have seen that there is a for sale sign out at the hospital. There is a for sale sign up there. You can rest assured that Apollo, the owner, first of all, understands that not only the town of Ayer, but the region is committed to the return of the hospital, that it is zoned medical. Apollo knows this loud and clear. They also know that the zoning could only be changed by a 2/3 vote of the Ayer town meeting, and there is no appetite for that. And so I just want to rest assured they have every right to put a for sale sign out there, but we have no specific info on that. So to conclude, and I just want the chief to weigh in from his perspective, because just as so the board is aware, when we talk about the FY26 budget next month, one of the areas in the budget that we have not fully realized, in my opinion, the cost impacts is the emergency response. And we're trying to get a handle on that. And we'll have more of that to speak in January. But efforts are being made. There is a high level of frustration from many of us at the pace that this is taken. But I do want to assure the board that things are happening, but we have to be committed, and I believe that we are. I'm saying the collective we of the Neshoba region. It's like being in a marathon. The end goal has to be the restoration of the community hospital there. And if it has to be a phased approach, we go with the emergency room first and build off of that. As long as we're building off of that, that's the key piece. The last point I just want to bring up is the discussion of urgent cares have come up, and the chief can speak better to this. An urgent care, we already have them in the region, is not the answer. And one of the concerns is we didn't want the state, because that's a low-hanging fruit, we'll just put up an urgent care, or what does Chief Boneman calls it, or McCurdy, a doc in the box. They have a role, but we already have them.
Yeah.
The answer is to emergency room phased to hospital. So with that, that's sort of my update. We'll continue to keep the board updated, and through you, if the chief wants to talk about the
Yeah,
EMS briefly, because I think it's important.
Well, I think one other thing to add that I don't think got out there enough from the meeting when it was here is that the state is willing to entertain anybody, any and all offers. So it's not like they're not interested in people. It is such a large financial undertaking, so it's not, but yes, the emergency and phased-in approach, definitely.
And that's great that you said that out loud. Because
I
I
just don't think-
know you were at that meeting, and I think that's great that you said out loud. But here's part of the problem that we have. First of all, just to kind of add on to the conversation, and thank you so much for doing this, is people are scared, they're frustrated, they're mad because as more and more information has come out, and you realize how many years and these so-called breaks that we put on these things to be able to maybe stop something before it gets too far, never happened. And I've often said, maybe not here, but I've often said to people like, that's great when you update a regulation or whatnot, but you got to read the whole thing so that you can find out that there isn't a conflict between, you know, page 1, paragraph 3 and page 10, paragraph 6. And I think that's part of the problem. But what also is the problem is that our administration has not publicly stated, we will help anybody who's willing to buy this. This is the problem. This is why no one wanted it. And, you know, that is very, very sad on their part.
Okay.
As far as the emergency room, people are concerned about the fact that if you bring an emergency room, they're feeling like it's just going to be an urgent care. So when you talk about an emergency room, are you also talking about the fact that the x-ray will be back, the CAT scan
Yes.
will be back?
To Selectman Livingston's point, and it's a key distinction. When we say emergency room, the model is full emergency room with radiology, labs, all of that as the first piece. So these folks that are bringing people in emergency, they can all be stabilized there. But we're even arguing it can't just stop there. Then
Right.
the next to keep growing.
Right.
So it's an important distinction because thank you for clarifying that out further. It can't just be an urgent care, meaning just we were all familiar with urgent cares that serve a purpose. This has to be a real emergency room with all of these components and then built upon it. Yeah.
So, sorry, Chief.
No,
please.
continue, Mr. Chair. I think it shouldn't go unnoticed. Our town manager does a fantastic job as co-chair of the working group, you know, putting everything out there forward and trying to get that hospital back. Like I said, that shouldn't go unnoticed. I know spends a lot of hours doing that. And if briefly, I can
Thank
say,
you, Chief.
yeah, you're welcome. Well deserved. Just locally, as I've been here before, we know both of our ambulances coming and going all the time. We have callback all the time, meaning off-duty members come back of the call department. That, you know, incurs overtime. That it's not the model when we set out our budget for this fiscal year. So overtime is certainly something we have to watch. At the same time, I don't know how long that's sustainable. We could have potential burnout. They're on the road a lot. We have one opening already, and we had no certified paramedics apply for the job. There's 2 in school that will one graduate soon. And that's ongoing. There's surrounding towns that have, you know, 2 openings, 3 openings, many more than that. So this is all a bigger problem. You know, we're still good in there. You know, I just don't think that model is sustainable for the long term. As the budget goes, we'll certainly watch the budget. As the town manager said, as we prepare this budget, we know that there's only so many calls we can do. So we are certainly down some calls, whether that's we're not available and we have to call mutual aid, or they've called for our paramedics and we're just plain not available. We're taking care of our calls, but, you know, those other calls, you know, we have to rely on mutual aid. So having said that, what's that mean? That means potentially some of our revenue that we had normally been taking in may go down. So these are things, we're 4 months deep. We'll have to keep an eye on that as we build this year's budget, and see how that, you know, pans out for the rest of the fiscal year. So the biggest thing is for us is the overtime and the callbacks. And it does stretch everybody thin. Just yesterday, they went to, you know, a 4-alarm fire in Dunstable, so we lost the 4 people working. Well, we filled in with 2 paramedics. They came back, and the deputy and the fire prevention lieutenant were back. So in that period, they were gone like 4 hours. They did 5 medicals. So it does take away where the deputy's not doing their thing. Fire prevention's, you know, because we're taking care of the emergency calls. So as you can see the bigger picture, it kind of puts a lot of stress on the staff. So some takeaways to briefly sum it up. We did get the $250,000 that I mentioned before from the state, was just on capital. So and that's going to be a non-transport vehicle. So that kind of gives us another toolbox, if you may. You can't transport, but if the medic's there, you know, for instance, we won't lose an ambulance to an out-of-town medical. You know, we can send that car and said, you know, and then if we get another one, of course, we have 2 ambulances. But that just gives us that third vehicle where we can get immediate care to them if both of our ambulances are out. We'll continue to monitor the overtime and see how that goes in the next, you know, few weeks as we build the next budget. And as the town manager alluded to, we're looking to our state legislators to see if we know we got money for capital. The question is there any money there for the communities for overtime, for labor costs? And this isn't just about the towns that surround the hospital closed. It even come up at our last meeting where it affects when we transport to Leominster, whether you call it wall time. I can remember when we got there recently, there was like 4 ambulances ahead of us. And it's just, they might have beds, but it just takes time to get in there, get the patient off, talk to the staff. So it takes time. And what that does, so it delays, for instance, Leominster's 2 rescues, their ambulance are there. Well, that delays them. So if they have another call, guess who they call? They call Lunenburg. So it's a ripple effect throughout the region. That's why we have, I think it's 13 plus fire chiefs on that committee, because everyone to some extent is affected by the closure. So we look to the legislature, and just to give you some numbers and this will quickly sum it up. So 83% of our calls for the last fiscal year went to Neshoba Hospital. So 83% of the time. So since the hospital closed, Leominster Hospital has been our winner at 53%. So most of the time we're going towards Leominster. The 35% are going to Emerson, but in that last fiscal year, Emerson only got 8%. So between, just like we said, Leominster is the big winner. It's the closest, of course, at 12 miles, but Emerson's not too far behind. And then they just trickle out between Lowell General, UMass and Worcester, Clinton. We kind of run the gamut some days. I know over the weekend we went to Clinton, we've gone to St. Joe's, we've been to Lowell. So they just trickle out, and that could be dependent on their emergency. So that kind of sums it up, unless you have any questions for me, and I'd be happy to continue to report back. It's certainly, like at times, sometimes like all the full-time staff is gone and just nobody's there. It's just the way it is sometimes, but that's not unique to Ayer either. But we certainly have our mutual aid partners that, help us out in time of need.
Just out of curiosity, how do you decide which hospital?
So it's based on, like, certainly the preference can be upon the patient if their medical situation isn't dictating that. So if, for instance, they're having a heart attack, they either gotta go to Lowell General because they have a cath lab, or UMass Worcester. If it's a trauma, they have to go to either Leahy, which is a level 1 trauma center, or UMass Worcester, or we can fly them out. So it's medically based. For instance, Emerson is not a stroke center, so they have to go to Leominster or somewhere else. So each hospital has their own designations. But like I said, trauma, if it's that bad, we tend to fly them out depending on weather. But like in Ayer, it's 50-50 which way you go to Burlington or Worcester. Yeah, it's a paramedic decision, how sick the patient is.
All right. I think Pauline?
Thank you. I just want to give praise to our fire department and fire department chief. I listen to them all day long, as they well know. And I would almost encourage the selectmen to get a monitor so you know what is going on. These guys are out, Tim, correct me if I'm wrong, 24 hours of 24 hours. And the fires in Westminster and Dunstable the other day only took away from Ayer, who usually responds mutual aid to other towns. It is incredible what has happened with the closure of this hospital. And I don't have a solution, but I hope somebody on the board, Janice, I know you do, Robert, I hope you do, maybe Carly, there is a effort to create a community hospital so that we residents pay for it and create it and open it. And I know that's not fiscally responsible. And these are all intertwined, but I just appreciate all of what everybody is doing, especially our fire department. And now that Chief Gill has added the Narcan to um, their patrol officers, hopefully we'll stem this. But I'm sorry, it's really difficult for anyone in our residency to understand and appreciate why this has happened to us. Fair enough?
Yes. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right.
Mr. Chair, if I might he briefly touched on those minute clinics or urgent care, and something that like ambulances can't transport to urgent care, so that's something that would just actually create more of an issue for us. So I can tell you of a bordering town that their urgent cares, transports from urgent cares are gonna up 100% since the closure. So that's something we are trying to avoid, because if it were to be just an urgent care, that would be devastating
Thank
for
you
us.
for bringing that up, yeah.
Like a lot of our transport would just, people go to urgent cares maybe to avoid the hospital. They show up with chest pain. Well, they can't leave there in a car. They have to go by
Right.
ambulance. So that's something, as the town manager alluded to, we're trying to avoid that part. So we'll continue to work together that. And like I said, ultimately our solution is to get that hospital back open if it's in phases. But that's the ultimate goal, I think, that would restore, that EMS side of it and that inpatient and outpatient stuff at the hospital. Thank you.
Thank you.
And we will continue to keep the board updated. Thank you, Chief.
Thank you.
Thanks, Chief.
Thank you
Thank
very
you all.
much.
Yep.
And my last item, number 6, I just wanted to bring up for discussion of the board in the packet is the January meeting schedule, which is always a little different in the sense that normally you would be scheduled for the first and third Tuesdays in January, which this year would be January 7th and January 21st. However, as I put in the packet, with this sort of 2-week holiday zone, I call it, there will probably not be, as there has been in previous years, anything for January 7th to meet. It would be too soon. Of course, January 21st, which is your normal third meeting at 6, there's no issue. Also, the budget won't be transmitted until the 10th. So for discussion purposes, the board's schedule and the board's meeting, the 21st is good. The 7th, I think, is, with the holidays and everything, there's no need to meet the 7th. But in talking with the assistant town manager, there are some poll petitions that are coming up. So perhaps we consider meeting I don't know what to do on the meeting schedule. I mean, we could just keep it at the 21st, and if we need to meet, I know the board has always been available to meet for any reason. We just keep the 21st, or I don't know what the pleasure of the board is, but I just think that the 7th, we're just not going to have anything given with the holidays, and as we usually don't every year.
I think that, we can just, we as the members can just kind of like keep an eye on the 7th and, and if an action item comes up that we're needed, we come in. Otherwise,
Yeah.
call us. We'll show up.
Okay, as you always have, and I appreciate that. I just wanted to flag that.
Right.
Yeah, and I don't think those poll petitions are time sensitive.
Oh,
They're
you
all,
sure?
yeah, I'm gonna double check with them, but they always come in, in the winter for spring kind of construction season. So I'm gonna double check, but I think we're good. We have transfer of a liquor license, which they know they're waiting till January because we're in the middle of renewals anyway. So,
And they would be okay to
oh yeah,
do the end
yeah,
of January?
yeah. Like the ABCC won't even look at it while
Oh, okay.
renewals are going on. So.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so we're fine on that front. I don't have anything else.
I'd
Okay.
say we just,
All right.
plan to not have it if we
Yeah,
don't need it.
Okay. All right, I just wanted to bring it up. So with that, unless the board has any other questions, that concludes my report. I want to wish you a very Merry Christmas and a happy holiday season and a happy and healthy New Year, and we're looking forward to 2025. It's hard to believe it's going to be 2025, so wishing you all the best on this holiday season. Thank you.
Okay. There were no new business or select board member questions listed. Did you have anything that
No.
came up tonight? All right. And then approval of meeting minutes for December 3rd.
I have one small edit for page 2 of the meeting minutes. Towards the end, right after Ms. Conley stated she was the only viewer on Zoom, I would like, yes, but it's also for anybody watching on TV added, which is what I said. I think it just clarifies the conversation.
Okay. For people watching TV.
Because it does show up on the video
Yeah,
when it's
yeah.
posted too, so that because I look and it's like, oh, very nice.
Yeah.
That was my one change.
Okay, yep, I didn't have any other.
Okay. So with that, I'll make a motion that the meeting minutes from December 3rd, 2024 be approved as amended.
I'll second that. All those in favor?
Aye.
The chair says aye. And the amended meeting minutes are approved. And
And Mr. Chair, if I might say, happy holidays to everyone. Merry Christmas to everyone. Happy New Year to everyone. Everyone have a just lovely end of December, rest of your December, doing whatever it is you want to do. And be safe and have a good time and a smile on your face. And we'll see you in the new year.
and
with that, Mr. Chair, I make a motion to adjourn.
I'll second that. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. And we're adjourned.